Hospitality Meets is brought to you by RotaCloud, the staff scheduling app for hospitality teams. RotaCloud lets you create and share rotas, record attendance, and manage your team's annual leave, all in less time than it takes to make a brew. It can also make life easier for your staff, allowing them to check their rotas, request holiday, and even pick up extra shifts, all through the RotaCloud mobile app. Start your 30-day free trial today by visiting rotacloud.com/Phil and find out how much easier managing your team can be. Welcome to Hospitality Meets with me, Phil Street, where each week we take a light-hearted look into the stories and individuals that make up the wonderful world of hospitality. Today's guest is Hamish Anderson, CEO of Tate Enterprises and wine connoisseur extraordinaire. Coming up on today's show, Hamish has a deep reflection.
God, yeah.
Phil gets educated. There we are, every day's a school day. And Hamish reveals some of the things you have to do when delivering world-class events.
He's scrabbling around southeast London trying to find a bottle of Dubonnet.
All that and so much more as Hamish chats us through his epic journey so far, which sees him now at the helm of one of the most recognisable brands in the whole of the UK landscape. It's a wonderful insight into yet another journey hospitality can take you on. As always, please don't forget to give us a like and a share. Enjoy. And a huge Hospitality Meets welcome to Hamish Anderson. Hello, Hamish.
Hello. Absolute pleasure to be here.
Good. How are you today on this wonderful Monday morning?
I'm very well, actually. It feels like spring's in the air over the last weekend. The sun's out. It's all very good at the moment. We've got a couple of great shows just launched here at Tate. So I quite like this time of year. It sort of feels like things are positive and moving forward. Not that January's not positive, but it's always a tough month for hospitality in general, January. Yeah. Is it the same for you guys then? I mean, does your general footfall through the venue decrease through that period? Yeah, I mean, we're luckier than some in the sense that a lot of our footfall is obviously tied to how many people are coming into the galleries. So it's quite dependent on what type of shows we have on. And traditionally, many of our shows kind of finish that first or second weekend of January. So you get a nice sort of bounce those last couple of weekends. And actually, there's a funny phenomenon in the sense that I always think, I don't actually have any real evidence for this, but I always think we get a lot busier at the weekends in January because people sort of, they've been out and about spending lots of money all Christmas and December, and then everyone wants to do something worthwhile. And so they come to a museum in January. Right. Get that culture embedded in them. Absolutely. So yeah, we're not quite as down in some areas, but certainly things like our events business, which is quite a key bit of what we're doing. People are not doing many corporate events in January. So certainly quite a quiet time. Yeah, got you. Okay, so just tell the world the role that you have there. Yeah, so sure. So I run a business called Tate Enterprises Limited, which is essentially most of the commercial income that Tate generates. My background, hence our conversation, is hospitality, food and drink. That's about half our business. So we run all the cafes and restaurants. We've had all the sort of food and beverage outlets within the 4 Tate galleries. So the 2 in London, and then people always forget that we have 2 outside London as well. So Liverpool and St Ives. There we are. Well, actually, it's funny. Tate is defined by Tate Modern in many people's eyes, and actually, Tate Modern is the youngest of the 4 galleries. Is that right? There we are. Every day's a school day. There you go. So, and then we have various other elements, the main other elements of our business. So within the F&B side of things, there's the physical F&B spaces, and then we run all the events that are at Tate. So the kind of venue hire element of that, and then we have a separate team that delivers the events, food and drink as well. And then we run the on-site shop, so all the retail, e-commerce. We have a publishing arm, so we publish all the catalogues that you'll see in the Tate shops, and then also a range of other publications, children's books, art books. What else do we do? We have a kind of merchandising division that creates all the product. A lot of the specific product might be tied to either exhibitions or just the kind of product that we're selling the whole time, Tate tote bags, that type of thing. We have a licensing business, so image licensing and product licensing. And then the last thing we do is we have a coffee roasting business as well. So at Tate Britain, we have a coffee. We roast our own coffee. I think I've encompassed everything. By God. So, yeah, I mean, I'm not sure I'd fully contemplated what enterprises might actually cover. But, I mean, God, you've got a lot of enterprise going on. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that kind of portfolio is fairly normal for a kind of a large cultural institution like Tate. The bit that's really unusual is the food and drink side of things. As you'll know, most major institutions contract out their catering. And Tate has always taken the decision to do that itself, whereas the other side of things, the publishing and the e-commerce. Not everyone does it the same way, but that kind of model is fairly normal within the broader kind of institutions that you would compare with to Tate to.
Right, got you. Okay, so, well, I mean, obviously there was a bit of a journey. You didn't wake up one morning and you were doing this job. So
Yeah.
take us all the way back to the beginning of your career. How did you get into hospitality in the first place?
Well, I'd almost take that back to before I actually started working in hospitality. My family went to live abroad when I was kind of in my early teens, and before that, I would describe ourselves as a very, I don't know, normal British family where food wasn't probably central to our being and what we did. But then my parents went to live. My father got a job in Hong Kong, and we went out to live in Hong Kong. And that really kind of changed my outlook, and I think my family's outlook on food. Suddenly, it's a much more kind of sort of Mediterranean lifestyle there. You're eating out a lot, and I was exposed at quite a young age until I was up to about 14 to just going out to restaurants and food in particular and cooking. And we suddenly, as a whole family, very much kind of food became a very sort of central part of our lives. And then we came back to live in the UK, not that we always went out to fancy restaurants a lot, but just sort of cooking and discussing food and buying food and all that became quite sort of central to our lives. I went off to university, did a history degree,
Naturally.
Finished that. Was like, what on earth am I going to do? And I was very lucky. I started working just because really at the time I needed some money, although I was clearly interested in food, but hadn't really thought about it as a career. Started working at Bibendum restaurant, one of the original Conran restaurants, and was there luckily when Chef Simon Hopkinson was there, who was fantastic chef, making some amazing food at the time. And then we got very into the wine side of things when I was there, did my WSET courses. And then sort of after about 2 to 3 years of doing that, I actually realized I really enjoyed it and actually took it a bit more seriously and made a career out of it. So I was a Bibendum for about three and a half years. Had a brief stint at Majestic Wine, realised that working in retail was not for me, didn't last very long. Right. And then was lucky to get introduced to someone who was doing some consultancy work for Tate at the time. And it was a very formative time for that Tate Enterprises business. Tate knew that Tate Modern was about to open. This was 2000. And they were really just looking what to do with their whole kind of food and beverage and indeed enterprise business, because they knew the whole thing was going to massively scale up. And I was lucky enough to get introduced to someone who was giving them some advice. And then it kind of went from there, really. So I took over running the wine cellar at the Rex Whistler restaurant, which was the restaurant at Tate Britain, which always had quite a sort of famous reputation for wine. And then just was very lucky to kind of go on from there. And so I've worked at Tate on and off ever since, really. Parts of my career, I've only worked for Tate 3 or 4 days a week and done some other things, but then had the opportunity when the redevelopment of Tate Modern happened in 2015, the extension of the Blavatnik building there, I got much more involved in the business development side of things. And then 3 years ago, took over running just one side of the business, which we call Tate Eats, which is the F&B and the event side of it. And then we changed the company structures early 2023, so almost a year ago, and then took over as CEO running the whole enterprises business. So it's been a great journey.
Not half. Yeah. So what year was it that you actually joined Tate?
1997. I was looking at, I have, I think, I don't know if you have it on your computer screen, you get, your abbreviation of your name, which is HA, Hamish Anderson, and I'm 01. So, I think I remember working here when we didn't have a computer. So.
Right. God. Well, I suppose actually, I mean, I was a 1999 graduate from uni, and only in our third year did we start doing anything that resembled kind of emailing and stuff like that. It was it's a very different time, kids, if you're listening.
I was joking with Sarah, who's someone I'm working with closely at the moment, who's sort of taking over and doing a lot of the wine stuff and doing a really great job at Tate Modern and kind of guiding what we do with wine there. And she was doing stock counting the other day with this, a scanner, so just going along and scanning. It took like sort of, an hour and a half or something to count this. And I remember just telling her, when I first started doing it, I had to do it all on hand and then actually flip cards. So you had to enter all the stock on flip cards. She thought I was completely mad.
Yeah, holding a bottle up to the light going, I think that's about 3/4.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, God, yeah, different times. But so was it, just taking you back a little bit, it was Bibendum then the place where maybe it was a kind of, I think this is what I want to do, but Bibendum was the place that really cemented that, I'm finding my home now.
Yeah, absolutely. As I say, I started off there as that traditional kind of hierarchy. I was a commie waiter, so you were carrying the plates to the table, and then you weren't actually even really allowed to sort of interact with the customers. But it had a great, there was a great group of people there, some really interesting people cooking in the kitchen and front of house as well. There was a wine writer who's become a friend, Matthew Dukes, who was doing all the wine at the time there at Bibendum. So we used to have this, great setup where, I sort of got quite involved in the wine even before I became a sommelier there. It was just a really great background and training with this really interesting group of people, many of whom had gone on to work in lots of really different, interesting parts of the industry. But it was, it wasn't a sort of light bulb moment, but yes, it sort of slowly dawned on me that this, one, I could make a career out of it because, as you know, it was a much less structured industry then. I think we're getting much better as an industry now in providing that structure and that kind of framework to give, so that when younger people come into the industry, they can see a pathway through. Yeah. But then it was, I mean, if I'm honest, people were like, oh, you're working in a restaurant. And it was like, and there weren't many people who I was working with who had actively decided they were many of them a little bit like me, who sort of decided that they'd ended up working there, and that's where they'd ended up being. So yeah, it was definitely very much that. It was great food, interesting wine, interesting people, and it was a lot of fun, a lot of camaraderie. I mean, it was hard work. We were open late in the evenings, but yeah, I really, really enjoyed it, and that went on from there.
Yeah, I mean, I know we talk a lot about, or well, maybe we don't talk a lot about this, but the world talks a lot about the fact that this industry is long hours and la la la. But I've always been a great advocate that actually long hours in themselves are not a problem, as long as you've got a great place to work and that you care about the work that you do, because then it doesn't really feel like it's work.
No, absolutely, and I think that. That great place to work, and then that close knit team that you have. It's a lot of fun, and yes, I mean the hours are the hours, but I think from people from the outside think it's a lot worse. Think it's a lot worse than it is, and it's not. We shouldn't use words like worse. It's just different. It's just a different way of working to how many other people work, but equally hugely rewarding.
Yeah. Without question, and I think equally, pretty much any industry that is at the top of its game is going to put the hours in to make it happen.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I mean, we're lucky within our business now, and it's actually, I find it quite, it's been an interesting few years. I mean, I'm sure you've talked about it on this program, but the problems we've had as an industry in terms of recruitment over the last few years, and we've always been, because primarily we are a daytime business. I mean, we do obviously operate in the evening. We have lots of events in the evening. Historically, Tate Modern was open Friday and Saturday night. Sadly, not yet post-COVID, but we hope to change that soon. But actually, I find it really interesting certainly the last 18 months, looking at the type of people we're now recruiting, because there are people who, we're able to offer slightly less evenings, and so I don't know, I suppose we're getting a different type of person coming to work for us now, perhaps, than we were sort of 4 or 5 years ago. People who want to stay in the industry, but certainly want to have or perceive to have a slightly better work-life balance.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think that's a good step. A good step forward. It's part of the evolution of anything, I suppose, is that you have to evolve to what's going on around you, right? We can't spend our lives as an industry asking everybody to mold themselves to us.
No.
We've got to mold ourselves to the workforce.
No, absolutely, I'd agree.
To a certain extent. There's got to be a little bit.
There's always a balance.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's take you back to the beginning of your life at Tate in 1997.
Yeah.
So what was your first job? Just remind us.
So I was so there's a restaurant, which is, again, not open now, post-COVID. There's a restaurant called the Rex Whistler restaurant. So it was the main restaurant at Tate Britain, which had actually been a restaurant. It started off life as a tea room, actually, and then became a restaurant in the 60s. And right from the 60s onwards, always had this incredible collection of wine. Because they used to buy wine en primeur and cellar it. So I was really lucky. I took over running this ridiculously amazing wine cellar in my kind of mid-20s. But one of my first jobs actually was to try and get rid of a lot of the wine, because it was just one of these classic, quite sort of old school, institutionalized places that just been kind of buying wine for years and years and years and had far too much wine. They were buying wine on the basis of when people still used to drink a bottle and a half of wine at lunchtime. Right. And I hadn't quite worked out that people weren't actually doing that anymore. So yeah, I took over actually initially just on a 6-month contract to help kind of get the cellar in a bit of better order and redo the wine list and do some staff training. So I was the sommelier there for I think 4 years. And then I took on a much broader role when Tate Modern opened in 2000. So at that point, I started looking after purchasing and running anything you drank within the business, including tea and coffee, which still is around 45% of our turnover in terms of the eats business. And so then I was still working on the floor then, but still had this kind of sort of broader, interesting buying role. And then I was also extraordinarily lucky at that time. Some of our best customers in the Rex Whistler restaurant were all the team from Random House Publishing, which is a Penguin and various different other Century and various different other publishing houses there. And then I got to know one of the editors there, and one of those sort of great chances that you have in your life, I ended up writing a book about wine.
Oh, wow.
And that was published in 2003. And that gave me lots of other opportunities. So I then started doing some consulting outside of Tate. And that's when I essentially dropped my time down working at Tate. So worked at Tate 3 days a week. Ended up writing for the Telegraph for a number of years about wine and a few other kind of publications, but also got into consulting. So worked for other restaurant groups, pubs and people, putting together wine lists, doing training and stuff like that. So I had this really interesting time when I was doing kind of 3 days a week for the Tate, looking after all their drinks side of stuff, and then 2 days for myself essentially.
Yeah.
And yeah, I enjoyed that, but I think you've definitely got to be a certain type of person to be completely reinventing yourself the whole time as a sort of consultant and going out there. Because you end up working on a lot of sort of kind of launches and projects, but don't actually have the sort of longevity, which I actually quite enjoy. So
it's kind of like you get your head into something and then it's like, I've done my bit, off you go.
Off you go.
And you don't get to see the benefit of all of the work that you've put in.
Yes, I mean, there's a bit of that, yeah, and you don't get that, yeah, exactly. You don't get that kind of follow up, and that I enjoy going back and just kind of making sure something's working and following it through and finishing it. So you're just ending up. I felt a little bit like I was also a treadmill of constantly new projects the whole time. But it was fun. It was a great balance to have like that kind of 3 days at Tate and then 2 days doing other stuff. But then I was really lucky when, as I said, the new extension of Tate Modern opened, and I was able to kind of move into a more kind of business development role there and kind of look at the new restaurant we were going to put in there. Indeed, the other F&B spaces, a new members room, with another little cafe on the top floor there, and just kind of work with the rest of the senior team in terms of what the look and feel and how those spaces were going to work. And that really kind of took me to, I suppose, the next level within the business, and then enabled me to kind of take over running it a few years later.
Yeah, I mean, it's not bad for somebody who like just took a mild interest in wine at one point and developed from there. But the book, let's talk about the book, because I don't often get people within hospitality who have written a book about something they love. How did that come about? Where did the spark? I mean, obviously the spark was wine, probably, but where did that all come from?
The spark was wine, and I'd always had an interest in journalism. So, as I said, I studied a history degree, so I quite enjoy. One of the things that got me into wine, I mean, obviously the taste of it, but I really enjoy the kind of history and the social history side of wine, and the kind of how wine, and particularly places that wine has been made, speaks to much more than just wine or grapes or geography. It's the local people, and I used to love reading. When I was working at Bibendum, the sommeliers used to have, down in the cellar all the bookcase with all the kind of wine books on it, and that's obviously again pre the days of when the internet was really, you could just get any information you liked from the internet. So if you wanted to learn, you had to have whoever's book on Burgundy. But I used to love reading Michael Broadbent's books, which were always, he tasted these extraordinary wines from the times of the Russian Tsars and things like that. So that whole kind of side of the sort of, I don't know, history and reading about wine really interested me. And then one of the things I had been thinking of doing before I ended up staying within the hospitality industry was to do a journalism course, which I never ended up doing. So I'd always had an interest in writing, and I suppose it was at that time, 2003, when there was this whole kind of, everyone was looking for the new young person to talk about wine. And I'm not saying that I ended up being that, but there was a real, wine was just burgeoning everywhere. There was all these interesting wine producing regions, and there was a real desire from the media's perspective to find a younger generation to connect and talk about wine. So I was just really lucky, along with a few other people as well, like Matt Walls and things like that, to be sort of plucked from obscurity and given that opportunity to do that. So I wrote an introduction to wine called Vino, which was great fun to do.
Yeah, and that would be, I would guess that then sort of, based on what you've just been saying there around the fact that there's this desire to have a kind of younger voice involved in this world, would have been around about the time, I guess, that Jamie Oliver was starting to make
Yes.
his name in the younger voice for cooking. So
Absolutely. And I was very lucky because his one of the editors who worked on the books worked on his books, so he very kindly gave me a quote for my book. So,
oh, really?
Jamie Oliver's quote saying he quite liked the book on the front, which was very nice and very helpful actually. Because he got it into a lot of places. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, he didn't really go on to do much, did he? After
Exactly. But it was actually his wine guy was a guy called Matt Walls who worked with him on 15 and stuff. Also wrote a book about the same time as me. Right. He was an Aussie guy, really nice guy as well. So we were really lucky because then it kind of obviously it opened up other work and financial opportunities for me, but also it enabled. I did a lot of traveling around that time, went to lots of wine regions. It was super exciting.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite go-to region that you still is your best of them?
I suppose the regions, so Italy, both Tuscany and northern Italy, Piemonte, Burgundy, but I can't really afford to drink all the Burgundy that I used to be able to afford to drink now.
Even the entry-level Burgundies are not exactly entry-level these days.
No, there's nothing entry-level about Burgundy nowadays. And Australia as well. Those are the kind of regions I probably, you can't specialise in every area because it's such an enormous world, the wine world, and getting bigger as each, as sort of, regions that were probably slightly more obscure are now becoming more famous. So it's almost a bigger world than when I started in it. So, but yeah, those are the 3 or 4 regions that I was kind of best known for.
Yeah, impossible to keep up with it, really, as well, because there's also, within the new world, there's the new world coming through now. I had some fantastic wine from Georgia just last year.
Yeah.
And the history around their wine, I didn't realise they're one of the oldest winemaking countries in the world.
Extraordinary, yeah. And a lot of the kind of some of those extraordinary wineries, which are still run by the Orthodox Church, and making wine in a way that's it's hardly changed for centuries.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm not going to turn this into the wine cast.
We'll do that next time.
Yeah, maybe a little angle there.
5-star hospitality means having the right people in the right place at the right time, and that's exactly where RotaCloud can help. RotaCloud is the online platform that makes planning rotas, recording attendance, and managing annual leave easy. Its simple, drag-and-drop interface lets you create and share rotas with your team in minutes, while our built-in budgeting tools mean you'll know exactly how much you're spending on staffing before sending the rota out. RotaCloud also makes life easier for your staff, allowing them to check their rotas, request time off, and pick up extra shifts, all through the RotaCloud mobile app. Start your 30-day free trial today by visiting rotacloud.com/Phil and find out how much easier managing your team can be.
So, back to Tate. Advancing through the ranks.
Yeah.
I suppose at what point did it start to become clear to you that, again, you found your home, really, because you've been there for a very long time, and that you could continue to, I suppose, as we alluded to earlier on, you can see a path actually that could take you somewhere.
Well, I think there's a bit, particularly as you move up through the ranks, whether it's a manager or general manager or not. Very lucky now as the CEO. I suppose part of it's that confidence things and feeling that you have the ability to do that, and B, lead a team of people, which gets obviously as you move up through the ranks increasingly bigger. But I've been extremely lucky at Tate because we've grown incrementally as a business over the years. Obviously we've had these big step changes when something like Tate Modern opened. Suddenly we went from being that to sort of almost turning over 3 times the amount within the space of a year. But post that, we've had these kind of small incremental gains, which has just enabled us to kind of grow steadily rather I think than having to take these massive jumps. And so I think that's really helped me as well, because it's enabled me to just sort of, as our business has gradually got busier, my role has gradually evolved within the business. And I think that's really helped me as a leader and a manager to sort of slowly adapt and change as I've gone along. I haven't had to massively change my team structure. We've just kind of, again, organically grown with the size of the business, which I think has been really beneficial.
Yeah. One of the things I loved about on your notes that you've very kindly filled out ahead of time was, and I think you and I are very similar characters actually when it comes to this, is you talked about procrastination.
Yes.
But that's actually procrastination is a byproduct of thinkers, I think.
Yeah.
Do you think then, now being at the kind of the helm of such a wonderfully, actually quite a diverse business, really, in terms of what you've got to get your head into?
Yeah.
Do you think that suits that thinking type of person position?
That's an interesting question. I Right. I think you're probably right. I think it probably does. I think I particularly over the last years, as I've taken on this new role, which is essentially just in sort of blunt terms, in terms of the income that I now look after, double the size of what I was doing previously. But having lots of different types of businesses, you do need to think about them all in a slightly different way, and you need time to think about them. There are some similarities with how a publishing house runs to actually how a restaurant runs. The nuts and bolts of it, of a P&L, are reasonably similar. But of course, the rest of what they're doing is completely different. So I think it's really important that you do have time to think about how your business is running and make considered decisions. You just need to make sure you make decisions and don't procrastinate too much.
Well, yeah, there is that small detail. But, yeah, but then I suppose that's why, I think that type of personality, I think, lends itself to a role where you've got to wear lots of different hats, because you can give a considered opinion on stuff.
Yes.
And then you get the people who really know what they're doing to go and act out the ideas, basically.
No, absolutely. And I think that I find it interesting in the role that I'm in now. And I think in some sense that's made me probably even hopefully a slightly better leader of actually our food and drink business, because that's the area where I have deep knowledge and I hope expertise. And so, I always have to stop myself of, as I say, interfering with what they're doing, because, that's the area of the business I know really well. And actually I find it's quite liberating taking over a business that you don't know very much about, in terms of I'm not an expert in publishing, or I'm not an expert in creating product for our shops. But I think I can, I think that those teams that I'm now working with, I can bring things from what I've learned from my time in hospitality and bring it to their businesses and look at it from a slightly different perspective, without even getting involved in trying to tell them how to design something or what to publish, because that's their roles to get on with that. And that's kind of helped me I think actually just let the people who are good at running our restaurants and designing our menus just get on with it and do it, and just let me sit a bit more in the background.
Yeah. Well, I suppose that's a good lesson for leadership anywhere, isn't it? Really, is that you're not the best at everything in the business, so let the people who are flourish.
Yeah, we had a great so our kind of setup. Although we're a business called Tate Enterprises Limited. If you work for the Tate, you're essentially working for the government. So we're a separate business which has its own board, and the chair of our board until quite recently was James Timpson, from the Timpson, who runs the Timpson shoe shop. So really interesting business, and really great help to us when he was on our board. Anyway, I always remember when I took over running the whole thing, he gave me a really great piece of advice, which is, as a leader, you basically just need to concentrate on the top stuff and concentrate on the bottom stuff. I.e., you need to be on the ground. People need to see you and go and have a cup of tea in your cafes and make sure that that's all working. And everything in the middle, you just ignore and let everyone else get on with. And I didn't quite say it in those terms, but that was the implication. And I just find it a very useful thing. You just need to let people get on with it.
Yeah, which can be it's a tricky step to take sometimes, especially if you care about something deeply. To step away from it a little bit is it can be a tricky one.
No, absolutely, you're quite right, and particularly when it's very easy to do when things are going well, but it's much harder to do. Obviously there are times as a business leader when you need to get involved. If things are not going well, you need to act, and you need to get involved in the nitty-gritty of it again. But again, it is longer term, it is much easier and it is much better to let people within those senior positions work out their own problems and solve them, rather than jump in and do it for them. I mean, there are times when you have to do that, but again, it's just as you say, letting go sometimes is a good thing.
Yeah, easier said than done sometimes as well. But do you think your time, however short it was in Majestic, is now helping you with your retail head?
No. I didn't like it at all. No, I was there for maybe 5 months. I just spent the whole time. I was the van driver basically, so I used to drive around and deliver wine to everyone.
Right.
Although I think from a retail perspective, actually there are many. That's a bit of the business that actually is very, very transferable to what you're doing in a hospitality sense. Customer service is hugely important. Look and feel is hugely important, and again, the nuts and bolts of how the P&L work are again really quite similar, in the sense that labour is one of your main drivers and costs within the shop, as it is in the restaurant. You're looking to make a margin very similarly as we are on food and drink. So I actually feel that's something that I found reasonably easy to do. Whereas, other elements like publishing is a whole new world, and a fascinating world, but very different. You're doing things there again from a shop and F&B perspective. You're buying something and then you're selling it a week or two later if there's a bottle of wine or food that day. So it's quite a simple proposition. Whereas publishing, you're creating and commissioning a book that won't see the light of day and won't get you any revenue for 3 years.
Right.
It's a really different thing.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose, because from the outside looking in, I always just have this, I suppose, idea in my head that you're a big company. I have no idea what you turn over from a revenue perspective, but in terms of you have all of these different venues as well as the different revenue streams.
Yeah.
But it seems like, I mean, being the CEO of Tate Enterprises sounds like, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's actually quite an entrepreneurial role, because you can utilize that word enterprises in kind of pretty much any form that you wish it to take.
Absolutely. We're here to support Tate's mission and its values in what it does, but also one of the main reasons of our company's existence is to support Tate through financial contribution, and therefore we are given a free rein to be able to go out and do things that are within reason profitable for Tate. I mean, our business is interesting because we are about 65% of our turnover is driven by visitor numbers. So that bit of that income is incredibly tied to how many people are coming into the galleries. Of course, you can do better with the people that come in and improve how much money they're going to spend and whatever. But fundamentally, there isn't a huge amount you can change there. And so we're in a weird position sometimes where Tate's, most businesses, food and drink businesses or shops, are always looking to be growing. If Tate has a 10% drop in visitor numbers for the year, then that generally means that area of the business is dropping by 10%. So the entrepreneurial side is actually that other 35%. It's like, how can we always look to kind of de-risk the visitor number bit and actually have these other income streams that are not solely reliant on what's happening within Tate, which is things like, again, historically, our publishing business was very focused on publishing catalogues for exhibitions. That's what it grew out of. But actually, we now have a whole arm of publishing children's books and other books, which, again, not reliant on the exhibitions that we have on their other things. The coffee roasting business is a great example. I mean, that, again, we used to have a great guy who did all the training for our coffee. He came from Illy Coffee, actually, years ago, and he just came to me and said, I think, we're selling X amount of coffee. I think I could buy a coffee roaster and buy green coffee, and the difference is X, and we can make some more money out of it. And so now we have this fun business. It makes a huge amount of money, but it makes a nice contribution each year, producing all the coffee that we need to sell within our spaces, but then a wholesale business and actually a contract roasting business where we roast coffee for other small businesses and cafes and put together blends and stuff for them. So yeah, it's a we have the license to do things like that, which is great.
Yeah, no, it sounds like never a dull moment.
No.
There was also something else on your notes, and this goes back, and I don't know if I'm going to trigger you here by bringing this up, but it was an event for the pre-opening, and you had a problem sourcing a certain bottle of something.
Yeah, so when we opened Tate Modern, the Queen came and opened it. I can't remember whether it was actually the day Tate Modern opened or before or after. Anyway, part of the Queen's visit is a whole, obviously, load of her entourage arrives and then talk to us and our staff about A, how to behave when the Queen comes, and B, part of it was, well, this is what she likes to drink, because there was clearly going to be a toast of champagne or something when this big moment happened, and part of the request was, there was obviously champagne, there was I can't remember what the other drink, anyway, it was Dubonnet, and this was like 2000 this was, and like Dubonnet is quite in fashion now, but it wasn't in fashion then.
Right.
And there was, and also that was Southwark, around Tate Modern then. That was before kind of Borough Market and everything had taken off. So there were no kind of like sort of hipster drink shops that you could go and find Dubonnet in. So we were desperately scrabbling around southeast London trying to find a bottle of Dubonnet.
My God, I'd see different time again. Definitely, the people these days, they just don't know how lucky they are.
Yeah, I can't remember where we got someone. I think someone found it in a restaurant in the end. I think it could have even been half a bottle. It probably would have been sitting open for about sort of 2 years. So I don't know whether she actually drank it or not in the end.
Right. Well, I suppose she has a selection, doesn't she? Or had? Sorry.
Yeah. Exactly that. So you had to go with a tray of certainly a glass of champagne. I think it was Dubonnet and soda, and there was one other drink. But yes, it was always, you had to go with the selection, and then she made her choice.
Yeah, God, it's not bad, eh? You've made it if people are presenting a selection of drinks, your favourite drinks.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But any other funny stories from your career so far?
God, yeah. Well, what other ones? I think our events have always, we put on some some of them, yeah, you might have to edit some of them out because some of the stories I probably don't want everyone to know about. But I think some of the maddest things.
They're a hotbed of activity, aren't they?
Events. We put on some really great events at Tate, and so I've been hugely lucky to be involved in the sense that we particularly Tate Modern got a couple of event spaces there with really kind of massive scale to them. So we've done things like we've done 2 Bond premieres there. So we got in old Bond cars and put them on the ramp there. And I remember one when again, when I was very involved in the wine, and Bollinger have always supported those events quite heavily because of the Bollinger Association with Bond, and the agents for that business called Menzendorf, who we always bought lots of wine off. And I remember again at one of those events, I can't remember, someone very high up in Bollinger was obviously there, and we had to pour everything from Magnums, and there must have been 1,000 people there. And actually pouring champagne from a Magnum, if you're not a kind of had much, I mean, it's not actually that easy. And so trying to find like sort of 30 or 40 people who can go around and pour Magnums of Bollinger. So we did this sort of training, and anyway, I remember being given a really hard time halfway through the night by this dignitary from Bollinger that people weren't pouring their Bollinger properly. And I was like, by which time it was midnight, and frankly, no one really cared because they were all having a really good time.
It did.
But yeah, so I just think the opportunity to be involved. Our industry, just you get involved in these kind of these really fun different things. There's running a business, which I do, but we've got an event here tomorrow night for the opening of the Sargent exhibition. Some really interesting people coming to that, and I'll be at that. And so you still get these opportunities to do all these very different things. And I'm still kind of vaguely involved with the wine, and so it's a great supporter of Tate. So I'm working with him on the wine list for the night, and so it's just the diversity of it, which is great.
Yeah. And I suppose you also have to have a situation whereby the people who are putting on the program for the gallery museum itself, you've got to have a good relationship as well, because I guess your work supports the program, as it were.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, all elements of the video. Obviously, there's the publishing side, which are closely linked to all the curators who are putting on the shows, because there is the direct relationship in the sense that many of those curators are writing the essays and the introductions to those catalogues, but then feeds right through into the product that the teams within the shop are putting together, because they're working with both the curators and the artist estates to get, if we're working to have images on those, and indeed even the food and the drink as well. I mean, lots of people, particularly when they will have an event on, if there's a very direct link, they're very keen to have the theme of the show represented in the event, or the food or the drink or the styling or whatever it is. And actually a lot of the curators are really keen and really love getting involved in that. And I think it's one of the bits that my team kind of enjoy the most, when you get a really kind of engaged curator and then you find out that this particular artist has, I don't know, loved coffee or ate in this restaurant in Paris or did this and that, and then suddenly you've got all this kind of sort of rich stuff that you can kind of you can play off in various different areas.
Yeah, I can imagine that's when it becomes very, very interesting.
I think it's interesting and fun as well, because it's kind of like, something you get to that point, you actually realise, again, of course, our industry is a creative industry, but actually, that creativity of the menu and an event or whatever, and then the creativity of curating and putting a show together, actually, of course they're different things, but actually they're not that far apart, and the two worlds do cross over far more than you think so.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think it also highlights just what an amazing skill set hospitality gives you to almost tackle like anything that comes your way. Somebody comes to you with a bizarre request, the initial response is, well, maybe the initial response is, oh my God. But, then there's the creative part of the brain that kicks in and goes, wow, what if we could do this?
Yeah, no, I'd agree. And I think that's, again, really, really evident from an event perspective. You get these extraordinary events happen where it's a 5 or 6 day build to put together some, whether it's a fashion show, we always do quite a lot in Fashion Week, or just, and everyone else will know, is listening to this, those slightly, as you say, crazy requests when someone comes along and goes, can we do this? And your initial response, and of course our initial response in hospitality is never to say no, but your brain is saying no, there's no way this is going to happen. And then you go, let me go away and think about that. And then you come back with a plan. It's good.
Yeah. Well, and how many amazing things have happened over the years in all of the venues around the world because that has happened.
Yeah.
And that's a coming together of worlds as well, isn't it? That sometimes it takes people who don't know what you do for a living to shock your brain into action.
Yeah. No, that's a very good way of putting it.
Yeah.
Shock the brain into action. Yeah.
Indeed. Yeah. Absolutely. So, well, what's next for Tate then? What does the future hold?
Well, I think we're at a really interesting point within Tate at the moment. If like many institutions at the moment, we're going through a huge amount of change, but post COVID, the world within arts institutions is very different from many elements in terms of who's visiting us. Our funding models are, difficult at the moment. So I think, if anything, at the moment, our role as in Tate Enterprises is more important than it's ever been within the Tate family. So we are actively looking at other areas we can make some more money, so we can support Tate. So there's always that element of it. But we've got a couple of really interesting projects coming up. It's always funny at Tate because we have a habit of just building things at Tate, and every time we finish building something at Tate or renovating a gallery, everyone goes, "That's it. We're never going to do another capital project," as we call them. And we actually have two going on at the moment. So Tate Liverpool is shut for a big redevelopment, opening again, hopefully kind of late next year or early the year after. So that's really exciting because Tate Liverpool broadly remained fairly untouched since it opened in the 80s. And so we're putting in a whole new cafe there and a whole new retail offer. And really looking to upscale our events business there. Previously, we had quite limited spaces we could do events. So that's a really exciting project because it's essentially a whole kind of remodeling of the commercial offer at Tate Liverpool. And then on a smaller scale, there's a really beautiful and rather wonderful building down in Tate St Ives, which used to be Barbara Hepworth's main studio. We currently run the Barbara Hepworth Sculpture Garden, which is one of her smaller studios, and then an outdoor garden, which has got a lot of her works in it. Just across the street is this old, essentially working warehouse where she did some of her really large pieces in, which has been pretty much derelict since I think the 90s when Tate got it. And so again, we're going through this big multi-million-pound development of that space, which will open in a couple of years' time, and putting a small little cafe and a retail offer in there. But again, it'll be quite a fun event space, and again, just working. So I mean, that's fantastic working with both capital project teams and architects to deliver both of those. And then I'm sure Tate will go, "We're never going to build anything ever again," and then they'll start again and finish that. So there's always something new to do here.
Build a new gallery from scratch in the middle of nowhere or something like that.
Yeah. I think so. There's always that is, again, I've been hugely lucky here. There's always been this continually evolving landscape at Tate, both in terms of growth in the kind of bluntest terms, in terms of income growth, but actually just the changing and the evolving and the morphing of the offer. I think although I've been here a long time, you need to, particularly with your physical spaces, cafes, restaurants, shops, you need to be continually moving them forward and changing them. Otherwise, you suddenly realise that what you did 10 years ago is not relevant to what you're doing today. So I think that innovation is very important.
Yeah, I mean, I know that you'll have, in principle, at least you've got a captive audience to some extent when they're in there anyway. But nevertheless, the competition out there on, probably just around the corner is high, right? So you've got to be on it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's our kind of key things that we track are our conversion rates, and how many people come into the gallery and how many of those then come and spend money with us. And it varies greatly between each gallery, and Tate Modern is the lowest primarily for exactly that reason, because there is there's an extraordinary amount of competition. You come out of either one of the tubes or the areas that you want to get to Tate Modern, and you're going to pass 5 or 6 well-known brands that everyone knows. So we need to really make sure we're on it. Because actually, in many cases, people, I know in some senses, they come to us, they walk into a gallery and they actually come with a negative view of what they think, institution or museum catering is going to be. And it's our job to actually, change that view quickly so they come and spend some money with us.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, what a fascinating job you have from the outside looking in.
Yeah.
I'm sure there are days where you want to tear your hair out as well, but that's the same of any job around the world.
Yeah.
But I mean, just to kind of finish on then, I mean, you've had a cracking career so far.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to anybody listening to this as to why they should come into hospitality and have a career here?
Well, I don't know, I would hope that there is, and in fact, I know that there is still the opportunity to take the kind of career path that I have taken within the industry, in the sense that you can come into this industry, you can move through it, I think, really quite quickly if you work hard and you have the right attitude. I think although, as we talked a little bit about at the beginning, I think our industry is getting a little bit better. It's getting better at providing structure, but in some senses, it's all still very unstructured. Which, if you are prepared to go for it, means you can move incredibly quickly through the industry. There's a lot of opportunity out there.
Yeah.
Our industry is, still short-staffed, and so it is crying out for good people. So that, as I said, a lot of opportunity there. And I'd say if you like that diversity, I mean, a lot of friends of mine have what I call much more desk-based 9-to-5 jobs, and they all look in envy at what I do, because not only am I running an interesting business, but I mean, we're sat here, I'm sitting at this desk talking to you, but I don't sit at the desk all day. I still am wandering around our cafes, restaurants and shops, and having meetings and having lunch with someone and going to a tasting. They're just, my day is just brilliant compared to what I think of some other people doing.
Yeah, well, the old cliche of no 2 days the same.
No, it really isn't. And I think it's, I also think at the moment the industry is, it's not without its problems at the moment, but because of the kind of changes, I think that, what we're seeing structurally within the industry, everything costs more. We need to do things in a different way, I think, as an industry than we have done traditionally. And again, I just think that change will bring a lot of opportunity for anyone young wanting to come into that industry. Now it's going to be a hugely exciting time. You're not going to be working with systems that have been sat there for 15, 20 years. You're going to be given the opportunity to create something new.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think in the moment that we're in, where the industry probably has never had so many individual challenges that are all just coming together. Yeah. Actually, in these moments, that's when proper innovation is brought into the place, isn't it?
I couldn't agree more. It's exactly that. Even if you're working for a larger company, I think the opportunity to innovate will be there that it probably wouldn't have been 10 years ago, because people don't want to try new things when how they're doing is kind of doing okay or average or working. As long as you're making the money, it's fine. Whereas now, just there will be change, and there's, as you say, lots of opportunity to influence that for anyone coming into the industry.
Yeah, people hate change, don't they? Really?
Yes. Some people do, some people don't. And again, I think going back to the attitude of our industry, it's that kind of can-do thing. I think as an industry, it's ingrained. Change is ingrained in us far more than it is in some other industries. We're good at it. Someone rings you up and says, "Can we have this event next week? This is what needs to happen." It happens.
Yeah, and then initially your brain goes no, but
yes. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Brilliant. Thank you so much, Hamish. I much appreciate you coming on and sharing your story so far. Yeah. Lots to do yet, by the sounds of it.
Absolutely.
And wish you guys all the best with the next chapter of your journey.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for having me.
You're very welcome. Take care.
Take care.
Cheers. And there we have it. It was great to get some time with Hamish to get some insight into everything that goes on under the Tate Enterprises banner. What a wonderful business they have. My chat with Hamish is a great way to end Season 5, so I'm off now for a podcasting breather for a couple of months, but I'll be back in the summer with more amazing stories from the world of hospitality. So till then, thank you all so much for listening.